Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tianlu. Coming up in this edition. Mark Carney's Liberal Party is projected to win Canada's election and form the next government. US President Donald Trump faces a growing backlash over his policies, with his approval ratings falling to record lows. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stresses multilateralism is the cornerstone of the international order at a BRICS meeting in Rio. We begin in North America. Media projections in Canada show that Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party has won the election and will form the next government. Carney stressed unity in the face of the threats coming from Washington, including tariffs and annexation attempts.
There is also, for me, as I stand before you this evening, humility in recognizing that, many have chosen to place your trust in me, trust in the Liberal Party. Millions of our fellow citizens preferred a different outcome.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has conceded defeat and said his party will hold the government to account. Dan Williams reports from Ottawa.
Incredible. It seems as though there's been a really sensational comeback for the Liberal Party that just a few months ago looked down and out. The Conservative Party had a more than 20-plus point lead in the polls at the beginning part of the year, but that over the last few months has been seemingly wiped out. Mark Carney leading the party seemingly and sealing what would be a famous victory. Of course, there are a number of factors that have contributed to that, not least the trade war with the United States, also the US President Donald Trump also questioning Canada's sovereignty, suggesting that Canada should be the 51st state. And of course, the other element, Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister, stepping aside. His popularity had waned somewhat at the end of his near-decade reign as well. So all of those elements together, with Mark Carney coming in, a breath of fresh air for the Liberal Party, seemingly appealing to voters, leading to this famous win. And of course, the shadow of the US President Donald Trump hanging over this. Mark Carney very, very strong on the campaign trail, saying that he will deal with the threats from Donald Trump. It was a key message on the campaign trail. An incredible turnaround for Mark Carney then leading the Liberal Party to victory, it would appear. And of course, having an economist in charge when the economy of Canada is most under threat is perhaps not a bad thing either.
That was Dan Williams on election results in Canada. In the United States, Donald Trump's approval rating for his first 100 days in office has fallen to the lowest level for any US president at this point over the past 80 years. A poll by ABC News, The Washington Post, and Ipsos found that fewer than 40% of respondents approve of Trump's performance. The majority of Americans also showed dissatisfaction toward his tariffs and are concerned that the economic policies may lead to a recession. Critics say Trump's trade policies are having the opposite effect of what he pledged to make people's lives better. Concerns for a possible recession also overshadowed his campaign promise of an economic boom. Owen Fairclough examines the economic situation of the past 100 days.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
When Donald Trump was inaugurated US president for a second time on January the 20th, his confidence was understandable.
The golden age of America begins right now.
Trump considers the stock market his ultimate gauge of public opinion, and US equities, already strong, had closed out their best week in 2 months before he was sworn in. But as Trump marks 100 days in office, one analyst found stocks have suffered their worst start to a presidency in nearly a century, due largely to one word.
If you want your tariff rate to be zero, then you build your product right here in America.
Trump's sweeping tariffs on just about every trading partner in the name of protecting the US economy crashed markets.
And having hit those allies and major European trading partner with steep tariffs, many of them came to Washington, D.C. just days before Trump marks his first 100 days in office to inspect the damage for themselves.
Delegates arrived at last week's International Monetary Fund annual spring meetings just as it sharply downgraded growth forecasts due to those tariffs.
Just give us one word to sum it up.
Perplexing.
Chaotic. Wonderful.
Trump has postponed most of those tariffs pending negotiations, but appears unmoved by the financial pain already inflicted.
I said there'd be a transition. People haven't understood it. Now they're starting to understand it.
Especially if the central bank's fears about inflation making a comeback prove accurate.
Tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation.
If Trump's golden age is yet to materialize, he's focusing on delivering on another economic pledge.
The largest tax cuts in American history.
But Republicans who consider low taxes sacrosanct are alarmed over Trump's proposal for the richest to pay more, potentially creating a rift in a party over which Trump has so far enjoyed complete control.
That was Owen Fairclough reporting. Moving to Asia, the Indian army says it responded to what it calls unprovoked small arms fire from Pakistan army posts for a fifth day. Hostilities began after an attack in Indian-controlled Kashmir killed 26 tourists last week. India has set a Tuesday deadline for medical visas issued to Pakistani nationals. The government had revoked all visas for Pakistanis on Sunday. Ravinder Bawa has more.
Tension has escalated between the two nations with ceasefire violations across the line of control. The Indian army says that the Pakistani army posts have initiated unprovoked fire with small arms across the line of control. No casualties have been reported. Since the attack, India's defense forces have reportedly conducted several exercises across the country, including routine and preparedness drills. Security agencies have detained around 500 people for questioning after they searched nearly 1,000 houses and forests hunting for the attackers. Tuesday is the deadline for medical and long-term visa holders to leave India. On Sunday, about 250 people crossed the border as India has suspended all visa services as a part of its strong response to the attack.
That was Ravinder Bawa reporting. Pakistan's defense minister says the country has reinforced the military because an incursion from India is imminent. Islamabad continues to reject India's accusations regarding a terror attack in Kashmir and calls for an independent investigation. Daniel Khan reports.
In response to India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, a critical water sharing agreement, Pakistan has labelled the move an act of war. Islamabad warns that any attempt to divert or block its share of water will be met with full force retaliation. Pakistan has also closed its airspace to Indian flights, suspended trade and reduced diplomatic ties. The line of control has witnessed continuous cross-border fighting, raising fears of a border military confrontation. Pakistan's defense officials have expressed concerns over India's aggressive posture, emphasizing that the country's armed forces are prepared to defend its sovereignty. Islamabad also accuses New Delhi of exploiting the Pahalgam incident to divert attention from internal issues and suppress dissent in Kashmir. The international community, including the United States and China, has urged both neighbors to exercise restraint and seek a peaceful resolution to the crisis. As the situation remains volatile, both nations stand at a crucial juncture with the potential for further escalation if diplomatic channels fail to de-escalate tensions.
That was Daniel Khan on tensions along the India-Pakistan border. In South America, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is calling on BRICS countries to reject all forms of protectionism and uphold multilateralism. Speaking at a BRICS foreign ministers meeting in Brazil, the Chinese diplomat stressed the mutually complementary and beneficial nature of trade. He accused the United States of serving its own purposes at the expense of international interests and going against the international order that Washington has benefited from a great deal. Wang called on BRICS to protect the multilateral trading system and facilitate free trade. The key point of discussions at the BRICS foreign ministers meeting is defending trade amid sweeping U.S. tariffs. Lucretia Franco fills us in on what else is on the agenda.
Amid rising geopolitical tensions, the BRICS foreign ministers are gathering this Monday and Tuesday here in Rio de Janeiro for crucial meetings at a pivotal moment for the global economy. A series of bilateral talks preceded the formal gathering of foreign ministers on Monday, including a meeting between top Chinese diplomat Wang Yi, who met with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. The foreign ministers are focusing on immediate global and regional crises. In his opening remarks, Brazil's foreign minister Mauro Vieira stressed the urgent need for collective action to achieve peace.
The road to peace is neither easy nor linear. However, BRICS can and must be a force for good, not as a bloc that confronts, but rather as a coalition of cooperation, reaffirming our belief in a multipolar world where security is not the privilege of a few, but the right of all.
On Tuesday, at the end of the two-day event, the ministers are set to issue a joint statement. According to diplomatic sources, it is expected to focus mainly on multilateralism and reforms to global governance institutions. A first-ever meeting between all 11 BRICS member countries and the 9 ministers from partner nations will take place also on Tuesday. The expanded discussions will cover other key areas such as health, trade, artificial intelligence, global governance, and the role of emerging economies, as well as the global climate change crisis, which is especially important to Brazil as it prepares to host the UN COP30 conference in November. BRICS membership is expected to expand quickly, with more than 30 countries expressing an interest in joining the group. The bloc already represents nearly half of the world's population and accounts for almost 40% of global GDP.
That was Lucrecia Franco reporting from the BRICS meeting in Rio de Janeiro. Finally, in Europe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced a 3-day ceasefire starting May the 8th to mark the 80th anniversary of Victory Day. The Kremlin said Moscow has called on Ukraine to join the truce and is ready for peace talks without preconditions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said there is no reason to wait and Russia should commit to a ceasefire immediately. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said Kyiv is prepared to support a lasting, credible and comprehensive ceasefire of at least 30 days. Dasha Chernysova reports from Moscow.
We've just heard from the Kremlin that was a gesture of goodwill from the Russian president. It was his personal initiative to announce this 3-day-long ceasefire for the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Soviet defeat over the Nazi Germany. And Moscow believes that this gesture of goodwill should be followed by the Ukrainian side as well. They should also hold all the military activities, as will do the Russian armed forces. We are hearing also that Moscow will stand ready to repel any provocations and to respond in an adequate and effective way, according to the Kremlin's statement, to any of those violations from the Ukrainian side. But also the Kremlin is saying that they have been coordinating with the American side while preparing for this ceasefire in May. Moscow has been exchanging the information with the Americans, and Moscow also insists that it is showing that it is ready to continue the negotiations with the international partners to resolve the conflict in Ukraine through the negotiated way. And the timing of this is very interesting because it comes after the visit of the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to Russia. Last week he held talks with the Russian president, and now we have this announcement, but also it comes ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump marking 100 of days in the office of U.S. president. So Moscow is seen by the political scientists here as giving Donald Trump an opportunity to have something to boast about, because he was saying that he would be able to end the conflict in Ukraine in just 24 hours. We're also hearing the Russian side very clearly saying that they have already had experience in dealing with Ukraine. Easter ceasefire was also declared unilaterally by the Russian side, but back then Moscow and Kyiv were accusing each other of multiple violations. Moscow saying that they have presented the evidence to the Western partners, especially the United States. So obviously it is a surprise announcement, but keep in mind that on the 80th anniversary of victory, there will be at least 20 international leaders coming to Russia and to celebrate this victory along with the Russian president in the parades that will be taking place in the Red Square.
That was Dasha Chinishova reporting. Recapping today's headlines. Mark Carney's Liberal Party is projected to win Canada's election and form the next government. US President Donald Trump faces a growing backlash over his policies, with his approval ratings falling to record lows. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stresses multilateralism is the cornerstone of the international order at a BRICS meeting in Rio. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tianlu. Thank you for listening.